Welcome to the Chapter 38 and 39 Flipped Classroom from 1975 to the present. And this is called The End of the Bipolar World because during this time period, the Cold War ends. And here on this map, you can see the Russian Federation, the USSR, with its former communist-controlled satellites here. And all of these countries used to be part of the USSR. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and these countries, it's interesting, Russia has seen some trouble with them because of the religious and political differences. And that's a theme of the end of the Cold War. Trouble with these satellite states. So during this time period, there are three dominant and interrelated themes. The end of the Cold War and new international relations because of the end of the Cold War. You really see the United Nations coming into play in that power vacuum. The circumstances of newly independent countries, so some of the problems that they face and other challenges. And then the advent of a truly global economy or globalization and effects of that. Different access to advanced technologies is a sub-theme, as are the effects of worldwide industrialization on the world's environment. So these two. So these are the things to keep in mind as you are reading the chapter entering 1975 to the early 2000s. So what brought down the USSR? The collapse of the Soviet Union is really a fascinating topic, probably more for me than for you because I lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union, and for you it's pretty much history. The resulting power vacuum left the United States as the only significant superpower, and the end of the Cold War also brought in organizations like the United Nations. But economically, the expensive military buildup, the arms race, and in addition to that, the last Cold War, the war in Afghanistan, were drains on the Soviet economy. And because they spent so much money on this, they were unable to invest in high technologies, which were things like consumer goods and things on the forefront of technology, the cutting edge, if you will, of science and manufacturing. On a really popular level, modern communication like TV allowed Eastern European peoples to see images of Western prosperity, and that allowed them to make really unflattering comparisons with their own standards of living. You know, they would have only one type of refrigerator that everybody had, whereas in America you could have, one of 10 types of refrigerators or one type of backpack, and in America you could have hundreds of different types of backpacks. When Mikhail Gorbachev, the first Soviet leader from a non-Stalinist generation, this guy over here with Reagan, instituted his economic, social, and political reforms to stem the economic deterioration and to boost social and political morale, he basically opened Pandora's box. And there were all these problems. Allowing public political discussions at home and in satellite countries, the policy called glasnost or openness. So allowing people to actively and discuss the Soviet Union. And this other policy, perestroika, which was military restructuring. meant that the USSR wouldn't respond militarily to the internal or satellite dissent. This multi-ethnic nation imploded as one nationalist ethnic group after the other declared its independence from the USSR. And you can look to the map on the last page for that. This is the scene at the fall of the Berlin Wall, discussed in the other PowerPoint here. And this was seen as a symbol of communism. And when it fell in 1989, I believe, it was seen as a symbol of the Cold War ending. The war in Afghanistan was the last Cold War conflict. The USSR sent troops to support a socialist dictator, while the United States, through the CIA, gave money and training to the multinational Taliban fighters to support the anti-Soviet Taliban. They were led by Osama bin Laden, among other fighters, called the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen defeated the Soviet army and installed an Islamic-based government in Afghanistan, counting on the continued and promised U.S. economic support to rebuild the economy. We had told them that we would continue to support them, but since the war ended right before the end of the Cold War, we did not fulfill our promises. When no aid was forthcoming, in part, like I said, because of an end of the Cold War, the disillusioned Taliban and the Mujahideen vilified the United States. And later, Osama bin Laden went on to plan the attacks of September 11th, 2001 on the World Trade Centers, the Pentagon, and the White House. So you can see how this war was connected to these later attacks. In China, communism was also loosened. The dismantling of the Maoist-controlled economy after Mao's death and the rise of Deng Xiaoping led to China becoming more market-oriented in the 1990s. As China became more open, they sent people out all over the place, all over the world. But China's government was only willing to be so open. There was a limit. And as part of that, we can see the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, where demonstrators were put down using military force. These demonstrators were unarmed students and other civilians, and some of them were even run over by tanks. That is why in China, in China, they censor Tiananmen Square. That's one of the reasons they censored their internet, because of this event where the government brutalized its civilians. China also entered the World Trade Organization, and China, not Taiwan, and remember Chiang Kai-shek had fled to Taiwan after he was defeated, is now representative on the Security Council in the United Nations. So China has moved from very isolated to being a big player in the world. That's where we're going to stop for right now, and we'll pick up new economic forces in the second part of the PowerPoint.